Hi, this is Mark Arnold with another Fun Ideas podcast. And today on the show, I have a very special guest who's had me on his show 4 different times. His show is called Stu's Show. And here he is, Stu Shostak. How are you, sir?
I can't believe I'm actually on your show after all these years. I'm fine. How are you?
Good. Is it a shock that I have a show?
It is.
I did have a broadcasting degree. You may not know that, so I do have.
I would
it's
never
just,
have known
yeah, but I'm a little more lackadaisical than you on how I do things, but I get things done anyway. Enough about that. This show is actually a focus on you, and part of the reason I had you on here, but then you're going to come back probably later when the filmmaker is with us, is that there's a new film called Stu's Show, ironically, clever title, and about all the history behind you. And from what I can tell, after Janine, your wife, had an aneurysm, all the support that all the various celebrities you had on the show helped you out. And then, of course, the dark side of the whole documentary about
the whole thing is
the wonderful medical system we have around here. So I don't know how much you want to give away ahead of time. But,
I don't want to give too much away, but let me just say that once you figure out, and I don't want to go into this too much now, because when CJ, the filmmaker, is on with you, then we can really hit the nuts and bolts. And we have to kind of be careful right now, because I can't even give I don't know when this is going to air, but right now the PR company and the distributor for the film have the hold on all of this, and they have to be the ones to make the official announcement. But the main thing I wanted to stress is, once you figure out how to work with the medical industry, you will find that there are some very cooperative, very dedicated, very good people. But until you discover how to deal with that, it's hell. Wow. It can be hell. It can be a blessing, and it can be hell. And you will see both of those elements intertwined in the documentary.
Very good.
And that's all I'm going to say right now.
That's fine. I won't go into any more detail. Because,
I'm not the nice, charming, lovable person that you've all come to know over the past 16 years. If you've been listening and watching my television show, and prior to that, my audio show, okay? There is a dark side to this guy, too.
But we're actually going to go further back, because I always ask people to start off. Just like, tell me a little bit about yourself. And one thing I found out about you, because I actually read your Wikipedia page, I didn't know you were born in San Francisco. So
I didn't know I had a Wikipedia page.
You do. So how did you end up
in San Francisco?
And how did you end up being?
How did I end up being born? Well, my parents got together 9 months prior.
No.
How
did you end up in Hollywood?
How did I end up in Hollywood? Well, I ended up in LA because when I was 4 years old, my father took a better job. He was assistant deputy district attorney in Santa Rosa from about a year after I was born in San Francisco until about 1960. And his aunt, my great aunt, was the head of a law firm in the Los Angeles area. Customs law, which is probably the most boring aspect of law. That's why you only see Judge Judy and People's Court and shows like that, because if they showed the kind of law that my aunt and my dad practiced, not only would the show be off the air, but the channel would be taken off the air. But anyway, he was offered a full-time co-head of the firm position with my aunt, my great aunt, his aunt. And so we moved to the LA area in 1960 when I was 4 years old. And that's how I got into LA.
Okay, because obviously I knew your dad was a lawyer, and
you did?
Yes, I think you mentioned.
You've done much too much research.
No, I think you have mentioned it, at least privately. I don't know if you said it on Stu's show before.
I may have said it a couple of times on this.
Yeah, but I don't even know if he still practices. I know he's still around, because he
still practices. He lives in Tucson, Arizona now, and he still has a handful of clients. He's going to be 91 in July. He still drives, he still plays golf, he still practices law, and he still can't get the hang of Windows 11. every single day. Anyway.
So did you get interested in all the stuff that you do in media and television and everything because you did not want to become a lawyer, or how did that come about?
It's funny that you say that way, because when I turned 15, I wanted to have a car when I was 16. And my dad said, the only way you're going to get a car is if you go to work. And since there's no demand for whatever skills you're lacking in right now, you're going to come and work for me. And the minimum wage at the time was $2 an hour. And so that was the longest couple of summers I ever had. But I did earn enough working for him to buy my first car, a 1970 Carmen Ghia.
Wow.
Which for $1,100, which if I had kept today would be worth like $50,000.
I think that's why I said, wow. I'm like, because I'm thinking of it now.
Be that as it may, those 2 years convinced me there was no way in hell I was going to become a lawyer. No way. It was the most boring, sit on your ass type of work, filing, typing, secretarial. It was horrible. And and he was hoping I would follow in his footsteps. And if I'd gone into any kind of law, it would have been copyright law. No, I think when it gets right down to it, from the time I was about 7 or 8 years old, I had always been fascinated with television. I remember my first grade teacher's husband worked at the local PBS station in Los Angeles, which was Channel 28 at the time. It wasn't called PBS then. This is how old I am. It was called NET, National Educational Television. And he came to the class one day, and I was 6, 7, 8 years old. I forgot, maybe it was second or third grade. And he talked to us about working at the TV station, and he brought a 16 millimeter film with him about being behind the scenes at television. And although it wasn't Channel 28, it was about KTLA Channel 5 in Los Angeles. And that film you can watch on YouTube. It's called Television Serves Its Community. And after 50 some odd years of seeing it only in school on an old clunky Bell and Howell projector, I actually saw it on YouTube and went, my God, this is the film that convinced me that my work was going to be in television. And it's a great film because they go from Monday through Friday. They show how a show gets on the air with rehearsals and working from the control room and writing up cue cards and doing the commercials. And I just, at that young age, I just decided that's for me. That's what I want to do.
Wow. So there was never any other aspirations, say, like movies as opposed to television or radio or anything else? Or did you not have such a
No. I had a smattering. Of course, we went to the movies. I saw Mary Poppins the week it came out. That's how old I am. I remind Dick Van Dyke of that all the time too, and he's really appreciative of that fact. But no, I was interested in radio. I was interested in any kind of media I could get my hands on. In 6th grade, now this was 4 or 5 years after 1st grade, 5 years after, if my math is correct. Yeah. 6th grade, we had a carnival at the elementary school, and a guy brought a reel-to-reel helical scan Sony videotape recorder and set up a booth. See yourself on TV. And oh my God, I forget the merry-go-round, forget the carnival. I parked myself in front of that booth the whole time, just watching him doing interviews with kids. He had this big old, huge old metal microphone interviewing the kids. And then he'd shut off the machine with this, clamp that was the size of a handbrake in a car. And then he'd rewind the tape and play it back. And it was in color on a 1967 color TV. And then he saw how fascinated I was. He let me do one of the interviews with another one of the kids.
Wow.
So I not only got to see, that could have been my first warm up, come to think of it.
Or first Stu show.
but it was anything that had to do with media. And I was a ham from the time I was a little kid. I was a class clown. So anything for attention, anything that would ingratiate myself in front of an audience, I relished. So it didn't matter if it was radio, didn't matter if it was movies. Television was my first love. Anything to get me in front of a microphone, I was all for back then. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Now, was your dad or your I don't even know much about your mom. You could tell me a little bit about her if she worked or anything like that too. But
She didn't.
both of them, were they supportive of this, or were they,
No.
you'll never make any money at this, be a lawyer or whatever?
My dad wanted me to be a lawyer. He pushed that. They weren't rejective of me. My grandfather was, my mom's father. He was a self-made man, and he invested in real estate, and he owned a pawn shop, and when he left us, we didn't realize how much money he had until he left us. But he was the old school guy who, if you weren't Jack Benny or Bob Hope or Eddie Cantor or one of the biggies, you weren't going to make a living in that industry. And so he did his best to discourage me. Obviously, it didn't work.
Did he want you to be a lawyer too, or just anything else?
No, when I told him I was going into television, and I was going to major in that in college, he did his best to discourage me, to the point where he said, if I followed in my father's footsteps and became a lawyer, he would not only put me through college, but he would pay for a swanky apartment in Westwood, because I started out at UCLA, had to leave there when I wasn't accepted into the TV department there, having worked in the TV industry for at least 2 years at that point.
Wow.
They were on a minority kick back then. This is when all the civil rights stuff started. This was early 70s, mid 70s, it was 76. I did my lower class, not lower class. What do you call the first 2 years of college? I'm sorry, I'm old. I forgot what it's
the
called.
Electives, basically.
Not the electives.
General education.
There you go. I'm 65, folks. Forgive me. Did my general ed, and when I went to apply for the television department, with recommendation letters from some of the producers at the Norman Lear sitcoms, from my boss who at the studio, they still rejected me. They said, we have to fulfill a quota of minorities.
Wow. And
I said, well, I'm Jewish. And they said, get the hell out of here. So I left UCLA, which is this level here, and went to Cal State Northridge because I could get into the TV department there and get a degree in directing television. But, you're going from a state university to a state college, right? So There was a bit of a drop as far as prestige is concerned. I didn't care. I didn't need the college because I was already working in the industry. I was an entry level, giving away tickets to television shows, but I had my foot in the door. I went to college basically so I could learn how to direct, because I could watch all of these great directors do their thing for, Maude and All in the Family, but I could never hands-on because it was unionized and you can look but don't touch type of thing. In school, in the proper school, you could hands-on and you do your own productions and things like that. So I got into Cal State Northridge. Had I not gotten into Cal State Northridge, I would not have met Lucille Ball, who ended up teaching a class there for 13 weeks, just like a sitcom, 13-week class at night, Monday nights. And of course, I was her star pupil because I knew everything about her, and I had learned a lot about the industry before I even took the class from my own observations and working in the business. And had I not met Lucille Ball, I would not have become her film archivist after her publicity director passed away in 1981. And so there was that aspect of my career that never would have happened had I not left UCLA and gone to Cal State Northridge. So there's an example of, I went to college, but it was just a matter of timing. It wasn't that. And yes, I'm grateful for the knowledge that I achieved there and what I learned. But again, in show businesses, timing is everything. Right. You got to be at the right place at the right time. And it does help if you're motivated, you're passionate, and you do have a modicum of talent that would get you to where you want to be. Okay. I'm still looking for that talent.
Now, you said something that I'm curious about now. So you were already working for Metro Media, you said. So prior to going to any college, or just at the same time?
Yeah,
okay. So you were in high school then at that point?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
How did that come about?
Flashbacks, Mark. When I got that Carmen Gia, I started to go to television tapings. Okay. The tickets were free, and they needed people to fill the shows. Now, it was impossible to get tickets for All in the Family. It was impossible to get tickets for Price is Right. It was impossible to get tickets for the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Your basic top 10 shows you couldn't get into.
Hmm.
Okay, there's a waiting list because
Right.
they were so popular. Aha! But Concentration with Jack Narr,
It's not a bad show,
Bob
but yeah,
Barker's
it's not,
other show, Truth or Consequences,
yeah.
those shot at Metro Media before Norman Lear moved to his shows from CBS over there.
Mhm.
You didn't even need a ticket sometimes. You could just go in there. And believe me, Johnny Olson and Johnny Gilbert and all these warm-up guys were so happy to see somebody in there without blue hair. Because the audiences in the afternoon at all of those shows were older than me, and I'm 65. So the great thing about that is I could hop in my car after school, drive to Hollywood, park my car, go in and watch Bob Barker do his brilliance on Truth or Consequences. And because I was there so much, they all got to know me. Even Barker got to know me well enough. So, you know, he called me his #1 fan when I was sitting in the audience. I was the only one that gave him a standing ovation in those days. He didn't achieve the success and the godliness, I guess, of Price is Right at that point. Price is Right was still a half-hour show back then.
Right. I remember
and
that.
then on Concentration, Johnny Olson did the warm-ups there. And I marveled at him. When he got to know me really well, he just spilled everything to me before the show. There were only 2 types of audiences that would go to those shows at 2:30 in the afternoon: the blue hairs or little kids who went there as a field trip.
Yeah, I was going to say
class,
field
so
trip.
that so the kids could see how it's, because those shows were easy to get into. They needed bodies because nobody wanted to. Who would want to go to see the Concentration when you could go to the Tonight Show or Price is Right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So Johnny Olson and I got to know each other real well. Johnny was a great guy. You want to talk about an old school show business guy. He told all kinds of stories to me about working with Jackie Gleason and on What's My Line and all of these shows that he did in the heyday of television. And to the point where if I came to the show early, he would have me go backstage and we'd chat backstage and we'd stand off to the side and watch the audience come in, right? And if they were old, and they weren't that much older than him because he was in his mids. He was my age back then. Okay.
Right.
But he dyed his hair and he had, I don't know if he had any cosmetic surgery, but you know, he didn't look as old as the audience that was coming in, but some of them clearly were his age. So he'd see them coming in and he'd go, "Oh, for Christ's sake, the old people again." Oh, and then because he's used to the Match Game and Price is Right audiences, people that wanted to go to these shows. And then the little kids, the little 8 and 9-year-old kids would file in and he'd go, "Oh, fucking kids, fucking kids." And at first I said to him, "Johnny, you don't mean that, do you?" And he just would look at me, you know, because he'd been in the business a long time. But after a while, it just got really funny because this is what he would do. He'd go, "Okay, I got to start in 2 minutes," and they're still coming in. He goes, "Oh God, fucking kids, fucking kids, fucking kids. Okay, here we go. Hi, kids. How are you? So good that you're here. We're so happy you're here." And the one thing that he always loved doing, because the old people, they would shoot 7 Concentration half-hour shows in one day.
Oh, shit.
They would do 4 shows with one audience and 3 with another. And when you fill that show with altacockers, you know, people 75, 80 years old, they'd start to fall asleep because let's face it, Concentration ain't the most exciting game in the world. Okay. So he would notice, I still remember this, he would notice people starting to doze off during his warm-ups at the beginning. And he did the greatest warm-up. He and Norman Lear were the inspiration for me to want to do that. And he would do this. He would find some old lady that would be nodding off, and he'd always start low. He'd say, "Well, how do you do, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Johnny Olson. I've been the announcer for Goodson and Todman for well over 100 years. And if you don't recognize my face and you don't know my name, you might know me for a little thing." And he would slowly walk over to somebody who was nodding off, an 80-year-old woman. He goes, "You might know me because I usually say this on one of the shows I work on. Come on down!" And that person, I was waiting for one of these old ladies to have a heart attack. because he would be like, come on down. But the funniest thing would be watching these old people jump out of their chair when he'd go, come on down to them. The crew, everybody cracked up. But that's how he vented his frustrations out on those types of audiences, kids and old people. There was nothing in the middle. And he got spoiled by the great audiences that they had at Match Game and Price is Right. But this is how I learned the business. I didn't learn it by opening books and saying, okay, now you take camera 1 and you mark it and put it here. You take camera 2 and put it here. I mean, there was some of that, but the best education I got was learning from these old pros. I met Danny Thomas when I was 17. He gave me 45 minutes of his time on a show that we were booking audiences for. He was astounded that this 17-year-old kid knew so much about his career. I just, while everybody else was getting stoned in the early 70s and listening to David Bowie and Alice Cooper, I was reading books on classic TV and listening to Tommy Dorsey, which explains my love life back then. And I was watching Three Stooges and Laurel and Hardy while everybody else was watching Deliverance and stuff like that. I just, but what happened was, to make a long story longer, I've been going to these shows for so long that the guy who was booking the audiences for them got to know me like everybody else. And it turned out that he lost the guy that was working for him part-time at Universal Studios, handing out tickets for the shows and at the Chinese Theater where people go to look at the hand and footprints of everybody. And he said, you've been around here a lot. I know you want to get in the business. I need somebody to work for me. And he not only hired me, but he hired me at 50 cents an hour more than my dad was paying me to work in the law office. So long, Dick Shostak. I was now working in television, and that was my end. So these last 15 minutes for that one little sentence answers your question, I hope. That's how I got it.
Well, I actually didn't know it. I mean, had I already known this, I might not have even had you on here because, I mean,
okay,
I know I know bits and pieces based on what you say, right, on your, own show. But I mean, it's like, you don't have time to just do your own thing. And it's, I think it's fun to be a guest on occasion, I would think, right?
So far, don't ask me, ask the people watching this.
Nobody.
Maybe not. Maybe don't.
Anyway, so if you had not become like a warm-up guy or anything that you did in that industry, but still worked was there anything you didn't want to do, or were you just like, I got to get in there, I'll work even in the accounting department or anything just to be in the industry? That's
how I felt leading up to the story of handing out TV tickets, because that is really scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Right.
Having to take a stack of tickets for a show that you don't know who's going to show and who's not going to show, and go up and get the tourists as they're exiting or entering Universal Studios and hoping that they'll take these tickets and show up. That is scraping the bottom of the barrel. So in the beginning, and that's something I learned from Lucille Ball, but I was already in the business 6 years when she came into my life, is that you accept in show business, because it's so, you don't know where your next break is going to come. You accept anything in show business, especially in Hollywood, with the hopes that somebody will notice you and scoot you up that ladder. So in those days, I would have done anything. Yeah. Now I won't do anything.
Well, yeah, but now it's the other side of the whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just funny. You probably don't know this about me or my dad. My dad actually worked in television in the 50s. He is now 84 in a month, and he's still with us. He worked at Bakersfield, and he had
just a hop, skip, and a stab from up here.
Yeah, and how he got the job. He had a cousin named Jimmy who's long passed away, but he got a job, and it was a paying job, setting up chairs for live audience for the shows on KERO in Bakersfield. And he was too late. He was too lazy. He did not want to do it. So my dad took it over, and that was my dad's first job. He was still in high school, and he actually stayed in the station for a couple of years. But I always bugged my dad. See, unlike your dad, who was like a lawyer and didn't want to be in TV, my dad was like, this is fun. But my dad was more interested in being an engineer and all that other stuff, and he did all the electronic stuff.
Did he get promoted to running the control tower?
Yeah, he ran camera. He did everything.
There you go. So he got his dream fulfilled. What I wanted to do at first was write.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to do. And when Norman Lear moved the shows in there, I pitched some story ideas at 20 years old to these writers. I got laughed out of the room on a couple of them. But again, you do what you can. I took writing courses at Cal State Northridge. I had Nate Monester, who was a sitcom writer in the 50s, was one of my teachers. Eddie Shodorov was one of my teachers. The great thing about Northridge, unlike UCLA, is the people that worked in the TV department there actually worked in the industry. Tom Burrows, who directed Chivalry, one of the rock shows locally in LA in the mid 60s, was my directing. It was my counselor, and I had him for directing one class. I had Bob Picerni, who was a writer on Happy Days, who really taught me everything I knew as far as directing. I had these hands-on teachers there that were wonderful that I wouldn't have had I gotten into UCLA, because though for the most part, at least at that time, those people were professors. They had maybe worked in the industry, but they were career teachers. These guys were retired and now teaching 50s TV to them. So Ralph Levy was a teacher of mine. At Cal State. Ralph Levy, who directed Jack Benny and Burns and Allen in the 50s. So I got very lucky. I mean, there was a reason why I wasn't accepted to UCLA. My destiny was Cal State Northridge, because again, that's where I met Lucy. But going back to what you said about your dad, at least he fulfilled what he wanted to do. And I realized that the writing scripts and everything, even though I thought I was good at it, was just way too competitive. And when I found out what warm-up guys were getting for doing the shows, I said, no, I need the attention. I desperately want people to like me. So I want to stand in to this day. And I'll stand up in front of an audience, and they can make fun of my high voice. They can make fun of me anyway. They can say or do whatever they want. At least I'm in charge, and I'm having a good time, and they're having a good time.
Now, is that the only kind of break into show business that, what am I trying to ask? Well, like, did you ever do just like straight stand-up or anything like that? It was always affiliated with this warm-up stuff.
It's funny because the warm-up thing happened as a result of the ticket thing. Okay. The warm-up guy at Diff'rent, they knew that I wanted to get into warm-ups, and I had watched Norman Lear and Johnny Olson and all of these people. And for years it was like, yeah, kid, just go peddle your tickets. I had worked myself up to page supervisor. An independent company took over Metro Media from the studio, and I left Metro Media and went to work for this lady who was great, got me in the door and all that kind of stuff. The original guy that I worked for had moved on, and I'd worked for her, and she knew that I wanted to do warm-ups. And what happened was, one morning at Diff'rent Strokes in 1982, the warm-up guy who lived in Long Beach, and Universal, as you know, is in the Valley, got stuck in traffic. That's a long drive. Even back then, the 405 was screwed. And they wanted to start the show, and there was nobody to do the warm-up. So the line producer came up to me and said, well, you've always wanted to do a warm-up. None of us here want to do it or can do it. Just go do it.
Wow.
And, I wasn't prepared.
Trial by fire.
No, but I had seen enough.
Yeah.
And remember, my job was to book the studio audience. I not only was responsible for handing out tickets, but I booked bus groups in, church groups and school groups. And this was Diff'rent Strokes. And of course, we had the old people and the kids. But you see, I was on the phone with these groups, talking to them and booking them. So when I went up there and took the microphone, they applauded because they knew me. But the producers didn't know this. So it's one of those situations, like, I compare it to Carroll O'Connor in the 4th year of All in the Family. He could fart and get a standing ovation. Because everybody knew him and loved him, and nothing he said could do no wrong. So that's how it was with me. And I'm getting laughs, and I'm not even trying to be funny, and they're laughing because they already know me. It's like, oh, wow, Stu's talking to us today. What is this all about? And the producers are standing off to the side, not really paying that much attention to me, other than the fact that I'm getting laughs. So the line producer said, when the warm-up guy shows up, just hand him the microphone. Just wherever you are, just stop and hand him the microphone, and we'll pay you what we're going to pay him, because, you can't do this. You got to be, in the union and all that. And this will get you your union card.
Oh,
so
cool.
about 2 minutes after he got there, I noticed him in the corner of my eye, right? And he was not happy. He was standing to the side like this. And then I was in the middle of something, and I saw him out of the corner of my eye, and I said, ladies and gentlemen, and I introduced him, and I just handed him the mic, and I ran like hell out of there because I knew he wasn't happy about it. And, for two reasons. One, I'm doing his job. And number two, now he knows that they know that somebody can take over for him if he can't do the show. And that's the worst in show business. That's the worst thing you can have, is that there's somebody waiting in the wings to knock you off. And I was very competitive in those days, and I was a jerk, and I should have been a lot nicer to him, but I wasn't. And I had never got a chance to apologize to him. He went on and still had his career. I had mine. He ended up being one of the writers of the Teenage Ninja Turtle movie. So he didn't do half bad. But anyway, that's how I got into doing warm-ups. It turned out that season, one of the writers was doing the warm-up on another show over there, Silver Spoons, the Ricky Schroeder show. And don't talk to me about Ricky Schroeder now, please don't. And you know why, Mark.
I actually, it took me a second. I was just,
I
was thinking of him then, not now.
Then he was a smart ass little kid, but he was like a younger brother to me, and we got along just fine. Again, I won't go into that, but anyway, the writer that was doing the warm-up there, a good friend of mine, Bob Isles, who I've had on my show several times, they needed him in the control room because he would spot stuff on the monitors while they were shooting the shows that they didn't see in the control room, because the control room is like Grand Central Station. There's a million things going on. So they needed a warm-up guy, and the line producer at Diff'rent Strokes happened to be the line producer for Silver Spoons. So they had the Silver Spoons guy come over and watch. I started doing fill-in warm-ups all over the place. They saw me on another show and they said, yeah, he's fine, bring him over. And that's how that from there, it blossomed. From Silver Spoons, I filled in on Facts of Life. Other production companies heard of me. I started working out of the Norman Lear shows, and it just blossoms because, it's a small industry when it comes to stuff like that, and your word gets around. The problem is when I hit 40, I started to gray a little bit. And the producers that I was working for weren't working as much because they were in their 50s. And we all kind of got aged out of it. In other words, you won't see me at 65 with this color hair doing a warm up for any show real soon. So, and that's why I started my own show, because I missed the audience. And for 15 years, I had no audience on the show except those that I thought were out there watching me and assumed. And now that I'm doing the show the way I'm doing it, I've got the audience back via Zoom, and I'm having a blast. It's like the old days. I have people to play off. So it all comes full circle, Now,
before we get into that, I'm curious because you did a number of things all at the same time. And I just wondered, how did you do it? And the origins of all these things.
What do you mean, Mark?
How did you do it? So you were doing this warm-up stuff. At the same time, you were working with Lucy and being her film curator. At the same time, you had started your own Shokus video, and possibly other stuff that I'm not even thinking of. So how did you juggle
and still no love life?
Well, there you go. That answered that. Okay. No, I mean, how did you find the time to juggle? It seems like the warm-up thing would take most of your time. Is that correct or no?
No. That was the beauty of the warm-up thing. Once I had my act down, and it was different. I'd have a set act of 10 or 12 minutes to tell them about the microphones and tell them how we shot the show and tell them how important it is that they enjoy the show because it gives the actors energy, all the stuff that you normally do. Once that was out of the way, my specialty was just being able to ad-lib and play off of them. I do TV game show type games with them during the breaks. If we had a long costume change or a set change and I knew I'd have 5 or 10 minutes to fill, I'd get up and I'd play Name That TV Tune with them. I'd have a boombox with me. And in those days when TV theme songs meant something, and there were still TV theme songs, that always played really well. As the years went on and I was still playing Andy Griffith and Dobie Gillis and stuff, and the audiences got younger and younger, that act fell on its butt. I had to start pulling stuff like SpongeBob and what Hillary Duff, whatever that show was of hers. Stuff that Family Matters.
Lizzie McGuire,
whatever. I had to get into all this Disney Channel, and I lost interest in that whole bit. But it surprisingly did not take a lot of time because once I had that stuff set, I would usually the show's shot Tuesdays or Fridays. So on Mondays and Thursdays, I would go down to the studio at 4 o'clock and watch the camera run through with the producers. to see how long the show was, to see where the long breaks would be, to meet the guest actors and make sure I knew their credits and pronounce their names correctly. And then Friday I would show up we'd usually do 2 shows, a 5 and an 8 or somewhere around there. I would get there about 3 just to play it safe with the traffic and just relax for a little bit. So, and then, you know, I would leave 10, 11 o'clock. As the years went on, the 9, 10, 11 became 11, 12, 1 a.m. because everything was micromanaged. We haven't got time to go into that now, but the whole face of the industry changed. And they were like,
well, don't they take forever to do a show now? You know, like
yes,
more current.
Toward the end of my career, which was about 20 years ago, you not only had the producers, you had the studio if it was Paramount, and then you had the network if it was NBC or CBS, and everybody had to have a say to keep their jobs. So we used to do 2 takes. We'd do 1 take, the audience would be great, right? We'd do a second take just for backup in case we needed it, or there would be a minor change, like maybe if we change this line, it might get a bigger laugh. And I'd have fun with the audience. I'd always say, okay, now this is where you guys get to be actors. You've got to pretend like you've never seen any of this and laugh in all the same places when we do this again, okay? Only louder, because you know where the laughs are now. And I was really good at keeping the audience's energy level up, even at 9, 10 o'clock. But when all of this stuff started to get micromanaged, we would do stuff 5, 6, 7 times. And I would be honest with them too. I'd say, guys, they're rewriting the dialogue. I don't care if you don't understand it. Laugh, or this is going to be Motel 6 and you're not going to get out of here until morning. And they thought it was hysterical, but they would cooperate. And the producers, even though some of them were down there on the stage, they didn't pay attention to what I was saying. They didn't hear me telling them this. All I got at the end of the show was, I don't know how you got that audience to laugh at the 6th time we've done this, but whatever it is, keep doing it. You're great. So I got all kinds of good, little did I know, I'm like bribing them. I'm giving them Milky Way candy bars to keep their energy level up. You know, I'm doing all kinds, but it was fun. It was fun. They were with me and I was with them. Now I've forgotten your question.
Well, I mean, so you explained that it sounded like you did the warm-ups like 2 days a week, basically.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, that's it. Okay. So if Lucy needed anything in the 80s, you know, before she died in 89, Entertainment Tonight was not the tabloid piece of crap that it is now.
Right. I remember that.
Leonard Maltin was there and and Gary Grossman, and they had all of these people that loved what I loved. So anytime they needed a clip from Lucy's vault or my own, because I had my own archives, they would call me and you know, I'd run my video business pretty much full time during the week, because in those days I'd get 30, 40 orders a week. Right.
And you said that before. That's why I was saying, how'd you find the time to do all this?
Well, the warm-up was only 2 days a week.
Okay.
And Lucy only called me once I inventoried everything for them in the early 80s. She only called me when they needed to send a clip to somebody.
Oh, okay.
And they let me have duplicate copies, master copies of everything in my Chatsworth office at the time. I don't even think I was in Chatsworth yet. No, I was still renting a condo, but I had everything in the condo in Canoga Park. So that I wouldn't have to go to their vault and pull it and transfer it. So if somebody was doing a retrospective on Lucy and wanted a clip of Jack Benny on Here's Lucy, I had a 3/4 tape that I could make a copy of, and then they'd send a courier over and I would hand it to them. So it all worked. I had a lot, believe it or not, I had a lot more energy then than I have now. And I was able to juggle all of this. The video business was the full-time business. I had left the ticket business. I quit handing out tickets and booking groups and stuff when I got hired to do Silver Spoons in 1983. So I got in the business in 74, 8, 9, whatever that is, 9 long years of putting up with irate producers when we didn't have every seat filled and, you know, all of that. But it paid off because I that was a stepping stone to the warm-up. And college was a stepping stone for Lucy.
Yeah.
And then I ended up going to work on Lucy's show because she wanted people that worked for her around her, because she hadn't been on television on a regular series in 12 years. So everything was luck and timing and a little bit of talent. That's the point of all of this.
Okay. I mean, my impressions of, in just, it's my own imagination, obviously, is like of working for Lucy is kind of like Steve Stollier with working for Groucho, you know, like you're there almost like all the time, you know, but I guess that's not really the case.
No, I wasn't there. I was there a lot. I would deliver stuff to them all the time. Gary would, Morton, her husband, would find something in the vault, and oh God, we should make a VHS of this so it's not just on film. The films hadn't started to disintegrate yet, but it's a pain to set up a projector, and they had VCRs and the whole bottom level of their house. And so he would call me up and say, get this out of the vault and transfer this for us and bring it to the house. So, it was full time, but it wasn't required of me to work for them until the series came, 1986. Then I was there full time. Right. So I was able to juggle this stuff, but there were plenty of days when I was up till 2, 3 in the morning dubbing tapes for my video customers. Don't kid yourself there. It was a 7-day thing. Again, no love life.
We'll get there, I guess. But I'm curious, when you got to Lucy's vault in the first place, was it organized or was it a mess? And what was in there? What did she have? Just everything from RKO days or what?
No, she had some features, but those were at the house. And what happened was Howard McClay was her longtime publicist, and he was in charge of all of that stuff. And he was with her from the 50s, from the Desi days. And he had a massive heart attack. I think it was a heart attack. He died in 1981. I had that class with Lucy in 79, and I kept in touch with them.
That's cool.
I don't think I'm speaking out of school now because it's 40 some years later, but I had contacts in the bootleg world for feature films on VHS and beta. And so I had copies of E.T. and I had Woody Allen films before there was any kind of, Magnetic Video was the first company to put out a handful of 20th Century Fox films. They put out Hello, Dolly and MASH and Patton. But I had access to Star Wars and all of this stuff in the late 70s that I never told anybody because we were all terrified of the FBI in those days. Right. But I told Gary Morton because I wanted to keep in touch with him and Lucy, and I wanted to score brownie points. And when he found out that I had access to Lenny, the Dustin Hoffman movie that he was in playing a Milton Berle type, he said I would love to get a copy of that. And I got it to him. And that's basically what started the whole thing, was getting him bootleg copies of movies because they weren't out legitimately. And he knew that I had the video business, and I had done a documentary on I Love Lucy for another class I was working, I was taking, directing a documentary, and I gave them a rough cut of it for their criticisms or comments. They had no criticisms. They said, this is great. You know this stuff better than we do. So based on that, and based on the fact that my video business had just started in 79, and the fact that I was able to get Gary what he wanted, I was their choice to replace at least Howard's film vault end of it. And to answer your question about was it organized, it was organized, but it was organized with a shelf number and a title. Okay. But there was no mention of the condition of the film, whether it was a syndicated print or whether it was an original Philip Morris print, all of that. So when they decided that I was going to take over that job, the first thing they said was, you've got to go in there and break all of this down. It was all computerized, tracked paper, with it. And he didn't know what it meant. And for me, this is a kid in a candy store. I walk in there. And there's every I Love Lucy, every Here's Lucy, every Lucy show. There's negatives and camera outs on Here's Lucy because that was the only thing they still owned at the time. There's her specials. There's her appearances on other shows. There's kinescopes from the 50s of her on What's My Line. There's kinescopes of the Ed Sullivan Show that she's on. I'm like in hog heaven.
Yeah.
And so it took me about 6 months, but I re-inventoried the inventory in a way that they can look at it and say, okay, we need the episode where Lucy's in the starch vat. And they can turn to it and say, starch vat, number 87, bonus bucks. That's what I did. That's what I did. Now, I knew this stuff, but I had to make it easy for them to know.
Right.
So, and then whenever anybody needed anything, they would call their office, and Wanda, Lucy's secretary, would call me and say, Gary needs you to pull this. And then I inventoried everything at the house. They had 3/4-inch master tapes on all the Here's Lucy's at the house. They had a handful of her RKO features. That was all in the projection room outside of the house. And so I inventoried that. That was nothing compared to the vault that It was Producers Film Center in Hollywood on Sycamore, where they stored everything. And the Goodson Todman stuff was stored there. The Danny Thomas stuff was there. Carl Reiner had all the Dick Van Dyke shows there. It was an amazing place. And I got to know the owner of the place really well. And I had carte blanche going in and out of there. Nobody outside of their own employees was allowed back there. But Bob Lobianco, the guy who ran the place, trusted me, let me back. And as a result of that, Bob recommended me to Jack and Elaine LaLanne, and I did the same thing for them. So just like with the warm-up, your reputation, your word gets out, and I'm still working for the LaLannes today. That's why they still advertise on my show.
Right. I've seen that, yeah. And did you produce those videos that they advertise on those commercials? Or
no, I
did.
did produce one. I did the Jack LaLanne commemorative special in 1990. We shot that in my living room in Chatsworth, and that's where I learned that Jack LaLanne was just like Milton Berle and Bob Hope and Sid Caesar and all these old school guys. Or if you didn't have your shit together, man, you'd hear about it. So we were all on our toes for that. But Jack was great. I loved him. He's sweet man, and he got me in shape after all those years. He one of the few guys on television who practiced what he preached. But what did you ask me?
Well, I was just asking, because you have the ad for Jack LaLanne, and
the video.
There's videos. I didn't know if you produced the videos that they.
Now, what happened was this, and again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but in inventorying their vault, I found the old 2-inch black and white tapes that he did when he first came to Hollywood in 59 and 60 for KTTV. Nobody had seen those at that time in 40 years. And I said to Elaine, we should try and find a place that can transfer these, and let's put like a week's worth of shows out and have Jack and you do new wraparounds for him. She goes, oh, what a great idea. So, we had no budget on it. They didn't want to spend a lot of money because we didn't know if it was going to sell. So I found a place in Hollywood that could do the old 2-inch quad transfers. I took a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday show, transfer all. We got lucky because the Tuesday show, they never stopped in those days. There was no editing. They would shoot live to tape because there was no budget to go, and you'd have to edit with scissors and stuff. He's in the middle of an exercise. I don't know how well this is going to look, but as he squats, you hear his pants rip and you hear the crew laugh. And he says, that's going to happen. If you gain too much weight, that can happen when you're working. He was and I isolated that. And I said, we've got bloopers. We've got bloopers for this. And there were a couple of other minor ones. But it was great because this was like a wealth of classic TV that nobody had seen. So that's on that tape. Anyway, we got a lot of mileage out of it. We made money on it and everything. But then Elaine's son, Danny, kind of took over the business as they were getting older, and he wanted to redo that thing without the wraparounds and just show the shows, because I guess he thought Jack was 75 when we shot the thing, and I thought he was in great shape, but Danny felt that the Jack LaLanne at 40 and the Jack LaLanne at 75, even though he was still in great shape, it was too much of a contrast, and he was afraid that people would be turned off by it. Again, it's the family. I don't mess around. But anyway, they redid it. I've got the original master with the way we did it, though, if you want a copy, Mark.
Okay, sounds good. Going back to Lucy, because I'm a big Lucy fan too. I probably became more of a Lucy fan thanks to the shows you've done where you show like the conventions and everything like that and stuff like that.
Tom Watson will be.
And I kind of wish that I had gone, but I didn't do that much travel. I don't do much traveling now. I just like.
Why do you think we're in Pine Mountain Club? We don't go anywhere.
Yeah. But I guess my question was, related to Jack LaLanne on the Lucy DVDs that came out for I Love Lucy, Here's Lucy, and Lucy Show. Did you? Any of those archival videos, are those the ones that are on DVD, or are those just like prints that she had?
I don't understand the question.
Well, I mean, the ones that you get, if you bought the MPI series of Here's Lucy, are those the prints that were in that vault? Is that exact print, or is it just a copy that you had?
No, the MPI Here's Lucy's are the Telepictures masters. They came from Gary's Negatives, Lucy and Gary's Negatives, but those were struck in the 80s for 1-inch tape syndication. They may have been the two versions of them. There's the cut down ones so that stations can have 6 minutes per half hour. And then there's the full versions. They had two versions cut. So they were existing masters that were just retransferred in high def for those, even though they're not in high def, they could be. If they could be transferred to Blu-ray. That's why they look so good. They were and Telepictures, Warner Brothers did the original transfers on those in the 80s. I was still working for them then.
Did you have anything to do with that at all, or
No.
you just were
No,
aware
in
of
fact,
it?
I think those were done right before I went to it. Those were done in 81.
Okay. Okay.
And then they went into syndication. They had a tough time selling it because they wanted too much money. I think by 84 is when they finally went into syndication, but those were done right before I came in, because now that you're reminding me, those were coming back to the vault as I was working for them.
Okay.
So yeah, they went out to Telepictures, the 35 millimeter negatives, and they did a 1-inch transfer to them. And that's what are out there.
Now the I Love Lucy's and the Lucy Show, and forgive me, I don't remember who's the gentleman that helped you on, and he's been on your show many times about
Tom Watson?
Yeah, Tom Watson. Did you work with him back in the day in conjunction with Lucy? How did that all work out?
Tom was vice president of research at CBS in New York for many years. They transferred him out here in 1975, I think. Okay. I'm trying to remember. It may have been earlier than that. I met Tom in 1977 when I was booking audiences for All in the Family, because Bob Schiller and Bob Weisskopf were writers on All in the Family, and they, of course, had written I Love Lucy the last 3 years it was on the air, and the Lucy Show. And so I got to know Bob, the two Bobs, really well, because I was a major Lucy fan and also a major All in the Family fan, and I was fascinated by the way the show worked. And it was Bob Schiller who told me about Tom Watson. He had just started his We Love Lucy fan club. And so I met Tom in either 77 or 78. And that's when he had first gotten transferred out here. And he stayed at CBS until Lucy, she didn't sell it. They coaxed her back into TV with Life with Lucy. She was aware of Tom all those years. He was the president of her fan club then. And she had a ton of admiration and respect for him, because he never published anything racy. There was never any Desi's cheating on Witch Hooker of the Week type of thing. There was never any of that. It was all positive. And he went to anytime she was on the Tonight Show or Dinah or had a special, he would call Wanda, and Wanda would get him into the show. And Lucy always wanted him backstage, to thank him for the wonderful work he was doing with the fan club. She really appreciated it. And then when Life with Lucy was bought by ABC, Gary offered us jobs as associate producers. And Tom, who had almost 20 years with CBS as a vice president, left his job to work on this show because of his love for Lucy. And, what happened as a result of that.
Yeah.
They replaced him at CBS, and he was out of a job. And Lucy and Gary felt terrible when we were canceled. So he got Howard McClay's old job as publicist. They kept me on for the film end of it. But then Tom became her publicist until the day she died, writing all the press releases, writing her speeches for her, with her, for acceptance for awards and all that. He basically became Howard McClay. And then when he died, he was able to get another job in research with another company in Hollywood. Right. But that was so nice of them. Kept him at the same salary, even though they had nothing in production, paid him the same that CBS was paying him. So that's when we got closer, because we worked together on Life with Lucy. And then we were going to do a Lucy convention in 1986 because Lucy needed some cheering up. That's the first time she'd ever been canceled. So one of the things we were talking about was doing this and having her and Gary there. They eventually nixed the idea because Lucy felt it was too self-serving. Then she died. And then we started doing the conventions in the mid 90s, 10 years later, with Gary's blessings. He was still around then. But again, he didn't want any part of it because he felt that if he was there, people would think it was his stamp on it. And he said, this thing, he was very good about this. He said, this thing has got to stand on its own merits with you and Tom running it. Well, Tom ran it. I worked for Tom. It was, he put up the money and did all that, but I was on board and, was one of the top echelon, if you want to say that. And Gary was very impressed, and we almost had him convinced to come to one of them just as a guest. And then he got lung cancer and he died. So we were able to go out and visit him a couple of times, and we tried our best to get him to come. But he said, I'll either break down in tears, and he had remarried by this point, or people will think that I orchestrated this. And I don't want people to think that I had anything to do with this. That was his thing. It has to stand on its own merit. And it did for 6 years. Yeah. So, and it was work. I didn't get to enjoy it much while we were doing it. But I'm
Yeah.
glad we videotaped everything. I directed almost, if I wasn't appearing on stage, doing a panel discussion or hosting a game show, I was in the booth directing a camera crew.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we got it, because all of those people are dead now.
Right. Yeah,
and
exactly.
we've got them talking about this, especially after that Aaron Sorkin piece of shit film came out. We've got the real Bob and Madeline and the real behind the scenes people talking about what it was really like there. It's not a distorted Aaron Sorkin-esque view of what went on back there.
Right.
So that's all I'll say.
I'll have to agree with you on that. First, when you were complaining about it, I said, it's just Stu complaining about something. But
well, bite me.
Yeah. But sometimes you're correct, and it's like, wow.
Sometimes.
Yeah. The only person,
little mongoloid. Sometimes.
the only person that kind of came out good is that J.K. Simmons as Fred Mertz, and I think it's only because or William Frawley, I should say. Yeah.
He was a sympathetic character in this, and it couldn't have been further from the truth. He and Lucy never went drinking out together and talking about that. Never happened. You know what Frawley was doing when he wasn't on the set? He was in his dressing room playing the ponies.
Yeah.
Or he was at a bar drinking.
Yeah, or at a ball game.
Sometimes he doesn't.
There
was no camaraderie there. I mean, they got along. Lucy adored him, but there was no behind the scenes. You know, if that was the case, Lucy would have asked the writers to write more scenes with just her and Fred.
Right.
Like 2 in the whole series.
That's true.
You're getting me all upset, Mark.
No, I didn't want to go into that anyway.
Is that what you want?
Well, you brought it up anyway. I actually wanted to ask this question. So a couple times when Tom is on your show, and this has related to the home videos again, and also the vaults. So I'm kind of curious. I guess I wasn't understanding what was in the vaults. Is for like I Love Lucy and the Lucy Show. Again, did they go to Lucy's vaults, or did CBS have all this stuff? So you went to CBS's vaults, or it's a combination? That's really my question.
CBS, Paramount owned the Lucy Show.
Yeah.
CBS owned I Love Lucy. The Arnazes sold I Love Lucy in 1957 to CBS for $5 million so they could buy RKO. Mm-hmm. And so CBS owns I Love Lucy, lock, stock, and barrel. Lucy had 16 millimeter copies of all of the I Love Lucy original broadcasts and one syndicated print when they were first put into syndication for Canada in the mid-50s. And they're slightly different than the syndicated prints that are on the DVDs. So as you know, then CBS and Paramount merged in the late 90s. So CBS acquired I Love Lucy, or the Lucy Show, and Paramount acquired I Love Lucy. They're all under one roof. So the only thing that isn't part of that is Here's Lucy. Lucy Arnaz owns those.
Right.
MPI has the home video rights to them. So no, they pulled from their own vaults because all of that stuff was sold to them, and they combed the Paramount vaults for the Lucy Show. They did come to me for some of the bonus materials. Lucy had some stuff that was one of a kind. One of which was the 75-minute version of Cruise to Havana, the first special they did in 57. For a long time, Lucy had the only surviving print of it. It was in 16 millimeter. And that made the rounds for a while. I found that. She didn't even know they had it. She had several different prints of Cruise to Havana. All of them were in big, huge 1-hour film cans, 62 rerun, 63 rerun, 64. And then there was one that was 3 reels long. And I said, why is this one 3 reels long? And before I finished the sentence, I went, this must be the 75-minute original version. And I unspooled it. And you want to talk about wetting my pants? Oh, my God. I called Lucy. I said, I can't believe I found the 75-minute version. And it didn't faze her at all. She said, oh, we have it. Okay. She didn't get excited. Like I said, Lucy, you realize? And at the time they hadn't found the kinescope pilot that was done on Gower. Then this was the holy grail next to that. This was the first thing. And so that made the rounds. And then when Tom took over the I Love Lucy's DVD set from Greg Oppenheimer, Greg did the first 5 seasons. Tom did the last season and 7, 8, and 9. That's when he ordered a full investigation of every CBS vault. And they found a 35 millimeter print of the 75-minute version. It was there all along. And that's what's on the DVD.
Okay. Now, in the vault, I mean, obviously you said you didn't have the pilot, which wasn't it the clown that had it? You know,
Pepito.
Pepito, yeah.
Right. And then CBS found their own copy of it thanks to Tom's diligence. And because Pepito's print, for some reason, had the first 15 or 20 seconds chopped off on it. It was somewhere in Pepito's house, and the leader and the stuff at the beginning had gotten caught somewhere and got cut off. And so Greg Oppenheimer kind of got Bob LaLanne back to be the announcer, and Bob LaLanne's voice was like mine in the 50s. And when he came in to do the part that needed to be, he's like, Gabby Hayes, it's a new show, and Lucille Ball, and he augmented, sped it up a little bit, and he's saying, doesn't it sound great? It sounds just like he did in 1950. I said, no. But anyway, that's all they had for years. And then Tom, due to his diligence, when they were doing the Blu-rays for I Love Lucy, found CBS's copy of it somewhere at CBS. Without Tom Watson there, CBS wouldn't know what they had.
Right. Then a couple other I Love Lucy things. Did Lucy have the Christmas show that was never in syndication?
Yes. Okay. She had one print of that. I got that transferred right away.
Okay.
I had already seen bits of that because that had been shown on a Rona Barrett special. CBS had found their print. Luckily, she had her print of that too. Okay. So yeah, that was one of the first things I transferred to preserve.
Okay. And then did she have the I Love Lucy movie?
No. You know, you want to know the story behind that?
Yeah. I don't know where that's from.
The last year of our convention, 2001, we'd heard that there was this movie that had been made with 3 episodes of I Love Lucy spliced together with wraparounds. Right. And, you know, the whole thing in the 90s, after she died for like 10 years, was like, okay, anything I Love Lucy that the public hasn't seen is gold. Anything we can find is great. So for the 50th anniversary, we were determined to try to find this film. And it went, we did know that whatever elements, whatever negatives, whatever prints were left, went to Paramount with the sale of Desilu in 1967. Okay, with the exception of I Love Lucy, which went to CBS in 57. When she sold Desilu to Paramount Gulf Western in 1967, everything, because they were on one half of that property, that lot, and there was a brick wall that separated Desilu from Paramount. Well, it's like Berlin. The wall came down, and everything on the Desilu side became Paramount's, including the film vault. So Dan Kahn, who was the film editor of I Love Lucy, specifically remembered them shooting an episode, the wraparounds, and because it opens with Desi doing the warm up and everything, and then because they had to figure out a way to explain a feature film that had a laugh track on it, because they were splicing 3 I Love Lucy films together that were already married, sound and video, so that, you know, there's an audience laughing. So they were brilliant. They wrote this thing of people getting in line outside. That was the actual place where people lined up to go in to watch I Love Lucy, and they made it look like they were watching a 90-minute I Love Lucy with wraparounds around. It was brilliant the way they did it. But Danny Kahn remembered specifically that Eddie Sedgwick directed the wraparounds, and then he did the editing for this feature film. And you mentioned Bakersfield earlier with your dad. They actually took the film to Bakersfield to preview it, to see how an audience was. Well, they wanted someplace safe where the word wouldn't get out if it tanked. Okay. And that's it. Then he said it went back on the shelf because they just made the deal with MGM to do the long trailer. And MGM said, we're doing this, you know, Technicolor CinemaScope extravaganza with you, and we don't want this old black and white show with you guys, you know, something that people see on TV. We don't want to be in competition for it. So it got shelved.
I'll have to ask my dad about that, because
it's the 50th anniversary of I Love Lucy, and we're determined to find this film. And Danny Kahn, who was with us for every convention, was more determined than anyone else. So he called his film editing buddies up at Paramount, and he said, I want to drive on the lot, and I want to go to every single area of film storage at Paramount that has anything to do with the Desilu library. And he says, because I have a feeling it's sitting exactly where it was left in 1953, as long as, but he said, but I don't remember where that is. God love this man. This was 3 or 4 months before our convention. He went to Paramount every day every single day and went to different film vaults. And when he found like an Untouchables room or a Desilu Westinghouse room, or, anything that had to do with Desilu Lucy show, all the stuff that was done there. And he found a case, an old film case that was labeled Desilu Playhouse. Now, he assumed it was one of the Westinghouse shows.
Right.
Okay. But because just like when I found the 75-minute cruise to Havana in 3 reels, this canister looked too big to have one of the hour shows in it. So he opened it up, and it was a center track copy of the I Love Lucy film in 3 big reels.
Wow.
It was labeled Desilu Playhouse because remember what I told you? They previewed it, and then they made the deal for Long Long Trailer and went back on the shelf. Whoever labeled it unspooled the film. The first shot after the credits that say I Love Lucy, because that's what the film was called, is a shot of the Desilu Playhouse sign that was in front of the entrance to the studio door to get in to watch the show. They didn't know what it was, so they just wrote Desilu Playhouse on it.
Wow.
So he found the film. He called us up. He was in his 80s when he found this. I thought he was going to have a heart attack. He made me look like Helen Keller with the 75-minute thing. Well, the next problem we had, remember I said it was center track audio.
Yeah.
Everybody had switched to a side track audio system. We found one company in Hollywood that had a center track audio, and we had it transferred right away to 3/4 inch. And because it was old equipment, it was a little over recorded like this. So I was able to balance it with the equipment I had, and we showed that at the convention. Nobody had seen that film in 48 years when we showed it. 48 years. Yeah, 48 years. Nobody had seen it since those people who saw it in Bakersfield in early 1953. And we found out that it was shot the night they shot the Handcuffs episode, the wraparounds, because the set for the Handcuffs, where they're in the dressing room where it says your favorite stars on television, was on the stage there. Desi had done the warm-up twice that night. They held the audience that was there for the Handcuffs after they finished the show. He said, we're going to do a film now. We're going to do a feature, and you have to pretend like you didn't see any of this because we're going to shoot my warm-up. They went back and got into the costumes that they were in for the show that opens that movie, which was the benefit, I think it was the benefit.
Yeah.
And they set up the apartment. The apartment had already changed a little bit. They brought back the old furniture and set it all up.
Wow.
And they shot this whole warm-up a second time to the audience that had already been there for the Handcuffs. It's pretty incredible. But Tom and I were able to figure that out from looking at the backgrounds while Desi was talking. Again, nobody would know that if it wasn't for Tom and I, because we know this stuff so well, and so we were able to provide liner notes on it. And eventually, CBS took it and released it out on as a separate DVD, and then as part of the
which is what I have. Yeah,
but we got to thank Dan Kahn's persistence for that, and the fact that we were determined to show that at the 50th anniversary of the Lucy Lucy convention, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the show. See, I want people to know that this is how passionate we are about this stuff.
Yeah.
And why we want everybody to share in all of this.
Yeah, well, I knew you had passion about. Isn't that where
really?
Isn't that where you met Janine, or indirectly met Janine because she?
I didn't meet her at the convention because I was married to somebody else at the time, and we don't have time for that. But
she was at those conventions. Yes,
Janine was at every convention. Janine was the first. Janine was part of the fan club, and then this is pre-internet days when Tom would send out newsletters, and everything was done through the mail. So every year we announced a Lucy convention date. Janine was the first person to send her money in for the whole weekend, and she became the good luck charm for the whole convention. I didn't know her. She was at every convention. She knew me because I was on stage every year doing something.
Right.
We didn't meet till I started my show.
Interesting.
But it was as a result of the Lucy fan club that we met.
I do have another Lucy question related to the intro that you said was for I Love Lucy movie. Whenever they did like the occasional flashback episode for like a repeat or something, how did they film those? Did they just tack that at the end of an episode with the audience already there, or how did they film those?
No, those were all done. The biggest, most they ever did was when she was pregnant with Desi Jr., as they had to stockpile, and because reruns were not a commodity back then, a lot of people were just still buying TV sets for the first time when she was pregnant. So what they did to give her more time off and to give the writers a break, they would show a show from the previous season, which was new to a good percentage of the audience. And so they might do 2 or 3 of those little wraparounds in one day.
Okay.
But if you listen really hard, the laugh tracks on those wraparounds is pretty canned.
Oh, okay. So it's not a live audience. It's not a live audience on those.
No,
okay. I didn't.
No, a good actor will always wait for the laughs to subside before they talk. And they were more interested in timing those things out because Philip Morris gave them a certain amount of time away in the days before, when the commercials, you could work with a sponsor and say, you know, we're 20 seconds long. Can we give you a 1 minute 20 ad next week and take 20 more seconds of show? And in those days, Philip Morris, they sold a lot of cigarettes for Philip Morris. They were more than accommodating. That's why there's some shows in syndication that are fully complete, but are only like 23 minutes, because that was one week where they took away so much time from the sponsor the previous week that they had to have a longer commercial.
Okay.
Those things, the wraparounds were timed to be a specific length. So they kind of had to estimate where the laughs were, and they'd have the crew laugh and stuff like that. But, you know, 10 people laughing as opposed to 100, you don't get that lag. So if you can tell when the actors start talking while the laugh is still going on, you know, there's no audience there.
One other kind of rarity, unless there's others that I don't know about. I mean, I'm pretty versed in Lucy now that everything's been put on home video, it seems like. That one Milton Berle show that Lucy and Desi did, that's kind of like an I Love Lucy episode.
Except badly written, yeah.
Yeah. Who had that? I mean, was that in Lucy's Waltz, or was Berle had it? Okay.
Berle had. We didn't have that. We did not have that. I had heard rumors about it. I had the TV guide where they appeared. Tom Watson and I assumed it was a tape because they had videotape by that point. We figured it was just a variety tape show that Berle did at NBC. And it turned out that he had shot it at Desilu. 3 camera, no audience. It was canned laughter. Again, you can tell. And it was a payback for him doing their show.
Right.
And it was shot at Desilu. And what happened was Lucy died. And my friend Gary Cascal, who was Berle's archivist, who's been on the show a few times, Berle called Gary up and said, you know, everybody's capitalizing. It was all about money with Berle, and Gary will be the first one to tell you this. Everybody's capitalizing on Lucy. You know, Lucy and I did several shows. See what's in the vault. And Gary found this hour show that Berle had done with Lucy and Desi. And the first time that aired was on Channel 11 in Los Angeles, and Berle did the wraparounds to it. And that was his way of making money off of her death, I guess.
Oh, wow. The first I saw it was on DVD, and I said, what's this? And I thought it was some garbage thing, you know, that, I mean, it's not that funny, admittedly, but I mean, I thought it was like some, you know, public domain crap or something, you know.
It was something with Lucy and Desi that nobody had seen. So it was gold.
Yeah.
It was gold.
On that level, it's not bad, you know. It's like that, you know. But anyway, is there anything else?
This is the problem that Lucy had when Lucy's writers were not writing Lucy stuff. When she went on the Danny Thomas show, it was Danny Thomas's writers. They made her out as some kind of kook. Yes, she was crazy in her shows, but there was some normalcy to it. Okay, Berle writers, nobody knew how to write for them. It's very flat and unfunny. I don't know what it is. But Bob and Madeline and Schiller and Weisskopf were the only ones that could write the Lucy character well. She had other writers. She had Milt Josephberg. She had Bob O'Brien. She had Fred Fox and Seaman Jacobs. All these people that wrote Here's Lucy's. I find her character in a lot of those pushy and annoying. She's not the scatterbrain, you know. When her voice dropped what's the word again?
Octaves.
Thank you. That would have been funny if I had gotten the word octaves out. When her voice dropped 6 octaves and she's yelling at Gail Gordon, it wasn't funny anymore. That was a problem with our show. She was yelling at everybody, and everybody was screaming their lines because she thought she was back in 1951 when the equipment wasn't so good. You don't zoom in, you dolly a camera in. She had forgotten everything that had happened on the Lucy show and Here's Lucy when we did that show, and it was right back to 1951. It was great watching her work, but you don't question anything she had to say.
That's one of the things in my Lucy collection I don't have yet. I still hesitate to buy it, but then you did get a cameo on it, I guess. I
had a part. She gave me a part on it.
Yeah.
That's in the documentary. I love that woman.
Yeah.
She could be she could be tough. She was a tough old broad, but she had a heart of gold, And if she loved you, you were in like Flint, and she
Mhm.
was a sensitive, caring person. And, you know, a lot of people didn't understand that about her, is that,
Yeah.
you know, working was the number one. You did what she said, regardless of whether you thought she was right or wrong. It's her show. It's her ass on the line. Whether you think it's right or wrong, you do what she says. That's why Gail Gordon lasted so long
Yeah.
with her. He deferred,
Well,
and all the directors deferred to her.
I mean,
So,
people always portray her as being really tough and stuff like that. But the one thing I saw in looking at all the different extras over the years, that seemed like the real Lucy, since I never met Lucy, was the New York World's Fair in 64, 65, where she was a special guest. I
yeah.
don't,
Yeah, I found that home. That
that
was a home
seemed
movie.
like real Lucy. Like she was not playing the comedian. She was not putting on airs. She was just being herself. Is that like accurate?
Yeah,
In
you
your
know,
opinion?
I've always said to people that have asked me, I knew two Lucys. I knew the Lucy that was at home with no makeup, who sounded like Lucy but didn't look like Lucy because the hair wasn't so flaming and the eyelashes weren't on and all that. And then there was the Lucy who was the TV Lucy. And when that Lucy said, "Hi, Stu, how are you, darling?" It's like, oh my God, that's Lucille Ball talking to me. But the Lucy at home, who was the same person,
Yeah.
"Hi, Stu, how are you, darling?" She could have been a friend of my grandmother's. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's two different people. So the thing is, I think what softened me on her was the fact that I knew her as a teacher first from that
Mhm.
class.
Mhm.
I knew her as a boss, but not in a here's Lucy type thing. It was like, I'm working for them, but I'm working out of my house and delivering stuff. And oh,
Mhm.
come talk to me, dear. How are you? Do you have to leave right away? That type. So by the time we went to series and I was working with her in an atmosphere that everybody knew her from, she was in charge. She was never nasty. It's just that voice,
Yeah.
that Broderick Crawford-esque voice, could be intimidating to some people. But
Yeah.
because I knew her, and she would say, like, I mean, and this is to the extent of her losing her temper on the set. No, 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 you can't put that camera there. That won't work there. You got to move it over, move it over. That's the type of thing she would do. It was never, God damn it, move that camera. It was never anything like that.
Yeah.
It was no, 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 no. That's got to come here. That's got to come here. And whether you as a crew person knew she was right or wrong, whether she was right or wrong, you did what she asked you to do. No,
Yeah.
nobody argued with her. People were afraid to, but she never, no, because of that voice. It's very intimidating. But you know, she never raised her voice and got mad when she was unhappy a lot, and she would show frustration,
Mhm.
but she never, I mean, I think in the 10 years I worked for her, she snapped at me twice.
Ooh.
And I got really upset. And one, I thought, oh my God, she's really mad at me. 10 seconds later, it's like forgotten. You
Do you
know,
remember what it was about?
I can tell you one time I thought she was going to get mad at me, and I couldn't believe I did what I did, because I am a boob. And I got we're in the pool house. They had a dressing room pool house for people before using their swimming pool, and she stored a lot of stuff in there. And this was in the early 80s, and she was getting ready to throw some of the kids' old clothes out and toys and stuff, and they were just in boxes, but she wanted to go through them to make sure there was nothing in there that sentimentally she wanted to keep. She's a very sentimental person, very sensitive. She'd cry at the drop of a hat, and I don't mean bah! I mean actual, you know,
Wow.
no, she wouldn't do that. She wouldn't do that. So we found Desi Jr.'s old Tinker Toy piano. Okay.
Wow.
So she said to me, why don't you take that? You may have kids of your own someday. And it's like, well, I'm not going to have them play this antique piano. But I put the thing down, and next to it was an old straw hat. You know, could have been Desi's. I don't know. And I don't know what possessed me to do this, because I'm thinking, my God, did I cross the line here? I put the straw hat on, and I started playing the piano, and I went, they call me Cuban Pete.
Ooh.
And then I realized who I was doing this for, and I froze. And she's right behind me, and there was about a 5-second silence, and she went, ah! She thought it was the fun. She goes, "You look just like Desi." Ah! I'm thinking, thank you, God. Thank you, thank you. She thought it was the funniest thing she'd ever thought. But for 5 seconds there, I thought, oh my God, I'm a dead man. But she thought, there were 2 times she got mad at me. And again, 10 seconds later, it was forgotten. One of them is the margarita story, which we don't have time to go into. It's a real long story. She was really upset with one of the rehearsals at Life with Lucy, and I had to drive her back to her. I'll just tell it. I'll tell it as fast as I can. Because again, my stupidity, and I asked for this, not knowing. The rehearsal went really bad. The scripts were not that great. And the writer's attitude was, well, Lucy will make it great. She'll take something and, make it great, which was the truth. You could give her something and she'd make it good. But this was a particular day where she even said, and she had no ego. That was the thing that people don't understand. She was in the middle of something, and again, she didn't raise her voice. She said something to the effect of, "My God, even I can't fix this thing," or something like that. But she didn't she didn't say it in a nasty way. She said it in a way where we laughed but she was serious about it. So Tom, who was her personal assistant, I was Gary's assistant. Tom was her assistant. For whatever reason, Gary sent him out on an errand instead of me. So I had to take her back to her dressing room, which is in a golf cart across the lot at Goldwyn. And she was not in a good mood because she was really upset about the show. And she wasn't upset about the show for the writing. She was upset that the audience wasn't going to laugh. That was her thing. She didn't care. She said she'd do anything they wrote she trusted them, but she just had this feeling that the audience wasn't going to laugh. And little did she know, like Carol O'Connor, she could fart and get a standing ovation. That was a problem with the show. It ran so long because she'd get these huge laughs and Gary would, in editing, would not cut her laughs. He'd cut everybody else's laughs to get to time, but not hers. And that's why she got to walk on applause every week. It was just a big mess. So anyway, she liked to have a drink after rehearsals, and especially today, this particular day, because things were not going well, and Tom knew bartending somewhat. I knew zero, Diet Coke is all I know. So we get to the dressing room and she says, "Fix me a margarita." Well, I didn't know what that was. I believe it or not, at 29 or 30, whatever I was, I had never drank them because I don't drink. I know what it is now. I learned the hard way.
Yeah.
So I didn't know. And then the studio gave her this fancy 1986, 49 speed blender. Okay. Which she hated. She hated it. She had Frank, the guy who was in charge of her house, bring the blender from their house to the dressing room. And just to show you old school, this thing had one of those old style rope plugs on it. This blender of hers was so old. I was afraid plugging it in, the whole room would explode. Wow. Oh God. And it had, you know how they have the plastic blades? This thing had like car engine blades on it. These thick, things where if you stuck your finger in, it would just gobble your whole arm up. This thing was a monster, but that's what she wanted to mix her drinks with. So, now I've totally forgotten. Margaritas, what's the liquor in it? It's not vodka. What is in the margarita?
Tequila.
Tequila. Thank you. See, I'm out of it. So all she had there was...
I know my drinks.
Yeah. All she had there was tequila. She just had tequila there. I figured, okay. So she had a beautiful dressing room. It was like a 1-bedroom suite. It was a little living room and a kitchenette and a bedroom and a bathroom and with a shower in case she wanted to, it was like a Raymond Burr, Perry Mason type thing, but it's beautiful. Anyway, she was in the living room area. And I'm thinking, what I should have said was, I don't know how to make a margarita. I should have said that, but she was so upset. I felt like if I had said that to her, she would have screamed at me, knowing that she doesn't really scream unless she's really upset. And I made it worse. So here's the deal. So now I'm like, I don't know what to do. There's no phone in the kitchen. I can't call anybody, what's in a margarita? So at some point she goes, "Where's my drink?" She's yelling. Every time I do her, I cough. So I'm working on it. And about 2 minutes later, she just got impatient and came in the kitchen. And she goes, "You haven't done anything here." And I said, "Well, I've got the tequila here." And I smiled. And she goes, "Well, start making the drink." So
Wow.
I mean, picture this, all right? I didn't know you needed the blender or any of this stuff. So she says, move the blender over here, start making the drink. She wasn't mad. She was just like, let's get on with this. So I kind of figured, okay, maybe I can get away with her telling me how to make this. This might work out okay. So she says, okay, now get the ice. And I knew where the ice was in the freezer. So I went and I got the bucket of ice out. And she says, all right, now get the shot glass. And I went and got the shot glass, and I'm standing in front of this bowl of ice with the shot glass. And she goes, all right, now put the ice in, meaning put the ice in the blender. Well, I took an ice cube and put it in the shot glass. Right. Ooh. And that I didn't know. He goes, no. and this is the first time I ever saw, because she was really upset. And then she goes, you don't know how to make a margarita, do you? You don't know how to make a margarita. Now watch me. She takes the ice, she dumps it in the blender, she takes the tequila, and she turns it on. She takes the glass, she pours a margarita, she goes, that's how you make a margarita. And she stormed out of the kitchen. I am terrified. I mean, it's like, this is it. I've pissed off Lucille Ball, one of my idols. My life is over. I may as well just go out on Santa Monica Boulevard with the other derelicts. It's over. 15 seconds later, she says, well, why don't you come in here and sit with me, dear? All over. She had her drink. She got what she wanted. She was relaxed. And I went out and it was like it never happened.
Sounds like an episode.
I was never so terrified in my life. Wow. The other time she snapped at me, it was just a minor thing. I was putting tapes away for Gary and his den, and I found something that I wanted to see, and I popped it on while I was watching it. And as I was popping it on, she walked in and said, what are you doing? And I said, well, there's this tape here. This looks interesting. I want to see this. She goes, why are you doing that now? I thought you're doing this or something. She didn't get half as mad as she did with the margarita, but she was clearly annoyed. Yeah. But then she walked out of the room, and then I turned it off because I figured, oh shit, she's going to be pissed at this. I don't know if that was before or after, but then I put it back in the box, and she came back in and she said, well, why aren't you watching what you wanted to watch? And I didn't want to say, well, because you indicated to me that it was not cool. I just said, I'll watch it later. I'm here to work. I said something like that, which satisfied her. And that was the end. But in the 10 years I worked for her, that was it. She never raised her voice, never got mad. Clearly the margarita thing, she was already predestined to explode. And I just kind of helped it along. But I was so afraid to tell her. I didn't know. I was stuck. There was no way out of that.
That was worth telling.
I don't know, it killed about 10 minutes. I don't know how long you expect this to. It's like my show. You're going to break my record.
It's 4 hours. No.
Oh, man.
I did that with Wes when I had him on the show.
You did 4 hours with Wes?
No, I did not. I said, I just started the show off. Well, tonight's 4-hour episode. And he about died. He's like, oh.
Yeah, well, he's a putz.
Anyway, before I wrap up, I just wanted to know, you met people like Wesley Hyatt, Steve Beverly, your announcers, and who else am I missing? Dick DeBartolo. How did you meet all these people? Is it just doing all the different things you've done, or is it just in travels, or
no, the people that you mentioned all came as a result of the show. Steve Beverly I knew before the show.
Okay.
Steve was a video customer, and so was Wesley. They both bought tapes from me because they're both TV historians. Okay. So there was some of that. But Dick DeBartolo, I think I met through Mark Evanier.
Okay. And then how'd you meet Mark?
It's a funny story with Mark. Mark bought tapes from me in the 80s, and I didn't know who he was.
Okay.
And then in the 90s, he called my office and said, you transfer 8mm home movies, don't you? I said, yeah. He goes, well, I have a whole bunch of my families that I've never had transferred. And I figured, since I'm buying classic TV from you, I may as well have you do them. And that's how we became friends. And Mark, that's one of the things that I'm most pleased with in my career. Mark Evanier is one of the most solid, nicest, loyal people. He is a good friend. He's a good guy. He's smart. He's funny. That's one of my proudest friendships is with him. And when I started my show in 2006. He was my first guest.
Right.
He did my first show, and he jokes that he's on my show more than I am, but he's a great guest. He's so multi-talented and so multifaceted, like me. I mean, not like more than me. He's done everything. Comic books and television shows, variety shows, sitcoms. He hosts panels at Comic-Con. You can't run out of things to say with him when you have him on your show, because every time it's a different subject, and he's brilliant at every one. Right. He's funny. He keeps things moving. He is the best talk show guest that you could have, and he introduced me to a lot of the cartoon people that I've had on my show.
Is that how you met Jerry then?
That's how I met Jerry. Actually emailed me. I met Jerry, and then Jerry introduced me to Keith Scott. Mark knew Jerry, but I had been on the air about 6 months, and Jerry wanted to do my show. So Jerry emailed me, but through Mark, I met Jerry Eisenberg and Willie Ito and Tony Benedict and June Foray. And I mean, as far as the cartoon people and voice people, that all came through Mark. And of course, once these people do my show and know that I'm knowledgeable about this stuff and passionate, and let them talk for as long as they want, they all want to come back. A lot of the people that did my show, I met at the autograph shows at the Airport Marriott in Burbank and down by LAX. And a lot of them came from my warm-up career and booking the audience. That's how Glenn Scarpelli was on the show, because I was friends with him. Joel Higgins, the co-star Silver Spoons. That all came from my years at. Well,
I figured the acting celebrities was from your warm-up years and everything else, and then word of mouth that way.
But the Leave It to Beaver people and Stan Livingston, I met at an autograph show in 1992, and he's one of my closest friends. I've known him 30 years now. And I met Barry through him, and I met Tina Cole and Don Grady and Tim Considine through him. And everybody but Tim was on my show. And now, sadly, we've lost Tim. It was bad enough when we lost Don. He wasn't even 70 years old. Right. And that's what's really hard about doing this type of show.
I know,
every week I'm doing an obituary now for somebody who was on my show. We just lost Dwayne Hickman, Sally Kellerman. Dwayne I've known for a long time too. The basis for the show, though, is I met most of these people either from the work I did in the 80s and 90s doing audience warm-ups, or at the autograph shows. And then, of course, word of mouth. People, Steve Franken, for example, wanted to do my show based on what Dwayne told him. Sheila James did my show because she was friends with Dwayne. They say, hey, you ought to do Stu's show. You get 2 hours to talk about yourself. Lately 4, but you get 2. And, and he's knowledgeable. He shows clips of your career and all that. So it's really not that hard. I'm booked for the whole season. I'm already starting to think about next year, but we're going to make a little bit of a change next year because, damn it, I'm old and I don't want to work as hard. So I'm not going away. Unfortunately for you sinners out there, I'm not going away, but I am going to change up things a little bit. You got this guy too. This guy on the other end of this Zoom thing. He'll keep you entertained.
All right. Well, all right. Well, I just wanted to find out a little bit about yourself.
A little.
Yeah.
Way too much. What is this? An hour and 45 minutes?
That's about normal on my show. It's at least an hour. Sometimes it goes 2. To wrap up the show, we usually just do, it's like, how can people get in contact with you? What are you doing next? Are you making appearances? Obviously, you're doing Stu's show.
After this hour and 45 minutes, it's not how, it's why would they want to get in contact with you.
There we go.
Well, StuShow.com is the best place to go. If you support the show each month, like 100 and some odd people are doing right now, you get a classic TV channel for free. Mark, you support the show. You tell them why should I shill myself? You do it. You be Doc Severinsen. I'm Joan Rivers. Go.
But this is your opportunity to self-promote.
I've been talking for an hour and even for me, that's a long time.
See, I do my shows easily. I just sit back and let the guests talk, unlike you. Anyway,
and you think it's going to be a part 2 with CJ, huh?
Yes. Let him do the talking. Anyway,
you realize when we started this, it was light. I'm sitting in the twilight zone right now.
I'm in the same time zone. That's the reason why I said.
Well, but I got windows everywhere, and to get the lighting right for this thing, I had to spotlight me in 2 places. I feel like I'm on a witness stand here.
Well, we're wrapping it up. So
I couldn't even wear my glasses because the light would come in.
So I will do a plug for you. Okay. So this man,
because I'm coughing.
Yeah. So this man, Stu Shostak, does Stu Show. You've been doing it since 2006. It started like Fun Ideas Podcast as just an all audio podcast. Then you went to video, low res. Now you're on high definition from Pine Mountain. And as far as I know, you're still going to go every other week unless you're doing something different. You keep alluding
it's
to that.
It's still going to be every other week, but okay. I am doing something different, and I don't really want to talk about it till the end of the year because it's now it's still in the idea phase.
Okay, but it's still going to be the same type of schedule, like roughly September to May. Is that what you're?
September to August.
August.
October to August. October to August. Yeah.
Okay. And I assume
at some point I will quit coughing too.
Yes, when we're off the air. And I assume you'll have the same regular guests that you tend to have besides the new ones, like you'll have Jerry
it's a 50-50 split. I have, Stephen West and Jerry Beck. Jerry's going to cut back on appearances next year.
Oh, okay.
But Stephen West will still do 3 shows a year. Bob Lesjak is a regular. Okay. Every time you publish a book, unfortunately, I have to have you on the show.
4 times my record.
Yeah. No, that's a lot. That's a lot, yeah, but I have about half the shows are regulars that do the show once a year and half are new. Yeah. I haven't had any problems since moving out of LA. People love coming up here and seeing the new place. And
yeah. Well, if you'll have me, I will come down there one of these days. It's like
I'll have you.
All right. You'll be waiting with a pitchfork.
Have you for dinner.
Anyway, so if there's nothing else, you gave a quick
There's nothing else. You can end this Zoom.
I know. Say hi to Janine.
I will. Hi. She's probably asleep.
Yeah. Tell her I love her jokes.
She fell asleep 5 minutes into this. Tell her what?
Tell her I love her jokes.
Only people that watch us on New Year's Eve know that.
Yeah.
CJ and Mal are going to be on my show to promote the documentary. And CJ said, a lot of people are going to be watching this. Does Janine have to tell her jokes on that?
So
I'm dealing with that now.
You asked at the front of the show when you don't know when this is going to air, but I'll just say I'm a little bit ahead. So this is going to be at the end of April. So,
before the movie comes out, I think I can safely say that without getting bleeped. I think by the time this airs, the announcements will be in the trades and everything.
Yeah. So pay attention to Stu Show for further details about the documentary called Stu Show. And then hopefully, we can hear more about it the next time you're on the show. And we can talk about anything other than Lucy. We can talk about Leave It to Beaver or W. Gillis or Perry Mason or any number of TV shows.
Why?
I don't know. I guess for TV fans.
No, the next time CJ will be here and you can talk to him about making the documentary. You can see him on my show on May 18th. Okay. And that's because it's been a pretty big roller coaster ride for him too, with COVID and everything, getting this out and getting stuff like that. So yeah, never at a loss for words. So thank you all for putting up with this for the last almost 2 hours now.
Yes. Hey, I had to put up with it live, so go figure. Anyway.
Fight me again.
All right, we're wrapping up another Fun Ideas podcast with my special guest, Mr. Stu Shostak, the host of Stu's Show. Check him out on his show, and we'll see you next time.